Okay, now it's time to actually undock and go do some PI. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is set up a new planet. So because we are doing a new planet that is not set up currently, we are going to need to add a command center onto a planet. I'm going to be doing lava planets to start. I've already purchased some command centers off of the market. If you go into the market in here and you go to the planetary infrastructure and go to command centers, in here you'll see a list of the various types of command centers. There's one type per planet type. So I've already purchased some lava command centers. You'll note that each one of these is 1000 M3, which is why we wanted our base cargo hold to be at least 1000 M3. So I'm going to drop one of these into my cargo hold, and then we are going to undock. Obviously, since you are flying a highly vulnerable ship, you would want to make sure there's nobody in local. I'm on the test server at the moment, so I am not particularly concerned with that aspect. So one of the things that you're going to want to do, if you're going to be doing this regularly, you can either add stuff to one of your regular overview tabs, or you can create a dedicated overview tab. So we're going to do that really quick. All right, so on the overview tab, by default, we have the standard stations and stargates. I'm going to go ahead and add planets and customs offices. There we go. Okay, so first thing we want to do is identify planet that we want. So we want to do a lava planet. So you'll notice that this system has two different lava planets. One thing that we can do here is, if we have multiple choices here, is we can view in planet mode by right-clicking the planet and saying View in Planet Mode. This brings up our planetary interaction screen. This is where you're going to do the lion's share of all of your PI from. Basically, you have a view of the planet. You can see right here is the customs office that is orbiting in the orbital path. If we go to the scan section here, you'll see it lists the various materials that are available on the planet. All lava planets have these 5 elements. What is different between the planets is the saturation level. So you'll see here base metals are about 33%. Felsic magma is rather high at about 80%. This is actually a relatively rare item, so it's good that that's high. Heavy metals, crystals, etc. So what we can do if we select on felsic magma, for example, is it gives us a color map, a heat map of the planet, which shows us where the concentrations of the minerals are. That will help us decide where we want to put our infrastructure. So part of this is going to be driven by your skills. So the higher your skills are with PI, the better your ability to get good results from the planet will be. So if we go over, we'll take a quick look at our skills here. So planetology and advanced planetology are the skills that that control how good the scan resolutions are when you're looking at the planet. So you'll note here that there is a slider. When this is maxed out, unless the saturations on a planet are 100% or unless they're located in one very specific region, it's not going to be particularly useful for you when it's maxed out. What you can do is you can slide this down, and what that does is it lowers the tolerance level for the saturation. So white basically means a high level of saturation. When we had it maxed out, you can see that there are a few hot spots here. There's one here, etc. But it doesn't give us a lot of data. So what we're going to want to do is you want to typically move this slider down until you start seeing some decent white areas. I find that in nullsec, you're going to have pretty good luck at either this second notch or third notch on the scale. You don't want to go too far down because, again, when you put down your harvesters, you're going to want to put them in a high concentration area. Okay, so that is the basic planetary view. This planet actually has some pretty good concentrations of felsic magma, and that's what we're going to harvest first. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, and we're going to warp to this planet. Okay, so we happen to land actually on the customs office. This customs office is actually in orbit, so it will move location over time. We just happen to get lucky and land right on it. Doesn't particularly matter. You'll note that we're at the planet, and we can do PI from here, but we could also do this, say, from the sun. One thing that is interesting is that your only requirement is that you actually be in system and in space. And if you have the skills, you can actually do some things remotely. When you're deploying a command center, you actually have to be in space with the command center in your hold in the system in which you're going to be deploying it. So I'm going to go ahead and warp to the sun at, say, 50. And I'm doing this so I can show you that it's not actually necessary for you to be on the planet. So you can actually go to a safe spot and cloak up and actually do your PI without being at risk. Okay, so we are now at the sun, or our safe spot, whatever you want to be. I'm going to go ahead and cloak up. One other thing I want to show you really quick is the planetary interaction screen. So if you go to your E up here, go to Business, Planetary Colonies, I would drag this over to Neocom. That way you have this available to you at all times. It's easy access. Simply click on that, and you'll see a list of planets that are set up. I actually already have 5 planets set up, which is the current max that I can do based on my skills. So before I'm going to be able to set up the planet in this system, I'm going to need to actually shut these ones down. So in order to do that, I can simply select one, view planet. And then from here, I'm going to select the command center, and I'm going to delete it. It's going to ask me to confirm. I'll say yes. And when I delete the command center, which is the anchor for everything else, it deletes everything else. So once I've done that, I have to confirm by hitting submit. And now that's done. Okay, so now I have one free slot open. So I'm going to now view our lava planet here, which is planet 2. View in planet mode. Go to the scan. Let's look at our felsic magma. My scanner is set to where I actually have a pretty decent resolution. And now we're going to start building by putting down our first module, which is the command center, which that again just needs to be in your hold. You can zoom in on the planet by scrolling in and out. What I recommend doing, the command center does not need to be anywhere near any of your other structures. So I typically like to put it someplace out of the way where I can find it easily, because sometimes it's hard to see with all the colors. So what I typically do is go to the top to the North Pole, or the equivalent thereof, and just drop it there. Okay. So now we have our command center. The other thing that I like to do is to upgrade it. The level to which you can upgrade this is going to be determined based on your skills. By default, it's at the first level. With full skills, you can maximize it all the way up to the highest level. So first thing we need to do is submit it. And then we can select it again, and we can choose to do an upgrade. You can upgrade it to the max level that your skills allow. Again, we recommend that you have your command center skill to at least 4 command center upgrades to at least 4. I would recommend 5 because, again, the more you can upgrade it, the more power and CPU you'll have available for putting down structures for doing PI. So you can get more out of the planet when you're doing this. So I'm going to upgrade this to 5, hit upgrade, that goes into effect. Okay, so since we're on the test server, I'm not going to be able to actually show you the wallet transactions occurring, but just be aware that you will be charged for doing construction. So with that in mind, we want to try to find an area where we could do harvesting. What we want to do is, there are 2 ways you can do harvesting. If you're only going to be harvesting raws, you will have enough power that you can set up 2 extractor heads and basically transport those materials to a spaceport and be able to transport them off planet for sale or whatever. For RONA, we want to actually do level 1 manufacturing on planet. And so towards that end, we want to try to find areas where we can extract minerals from the same area multiple times by being able to simply move the extractor head and not having to move the actual manufacturing facilities frequently. So this area that we're looking at now is actually a good area to do that, and I will demonstrate that by showing you the extractor head and how that works. So first I'm going to select extractor head from the extractor control units on the build menu. And I'm going to go ahead and place one. So I'm going to place one approximately here. Note that you can actually harvest slightly outside of this circle. So my goal here is to bear that in mind and try to maximize my coverage areas. So if I put one there, and then let's select it again, you'll notice when I select it, the circle comes back for the other one. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap here, but I'm trying to kind of maximize coverage areas here. So that's probably pretty good. So based on these two locations, we'd probably want to build our spaceport right here. Now, none of these changes go into effect until I tell it to submit. So even though I've put two of these down, they're not actually built yet and they haven't cost me any money. I put them here as placeholders so I can get an idea of where I want to put everything else. So before I go any further, I'm going to drop my spaceport so I can do this while I know approximately where middle is. And the reason I do this is because I want the power usage to go between the two different locations to the launch pad to be approximately the same. So this is about the middle. And you'll notice that I'm dropping this in an area where there aren't a lot of resources, so it's not going to be obstructing harvesting, the harvesting process. So I'm going to drop the spaceport there, and that's pretty much equal distance between these two. So now that that's done, I'm going to get rid of this one because I only need one of these extractor heads for the immediate purposes. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom in. Here's my extractor head. What we have to do is when we do extractions, you have to transport the goods from each building to the next building in the chain. So in order to do that, what you do is you hold down the control button and you click on the first structure. You let go of the control button, and you'll notice there's now a drag line. This is the link. And you'll notice that the link, the longer it is, the more power and the more CPU that it's going to require. So I'm going to drop that by clicking on the second building, in this case the spaceport, and now we have a link. Now if we hover over this link, it gives us some information, or rather if we click on it. So it tells us how much M3 it can move in an hour, and how much of its capacity is currently in use. Okay. So now let's go to our extractor head, and let's do a survey for deposits. Oh, we actually have to build it at this point, so let's hit submit. Let's click on our extractor survey, and let's do felsic magma again. Okay, so on the extractor screen, you'll note that there's 10 different heads. So what we're going to do is we're going to select a head. Now, if we select this one head, you'll notice that it created a head on the screen. I can show you that again by unselecting and reselecting it. And you'll note that it has a radius for extraction. So right now, the extraction size is set to the lowest setting by default, and the duration of the program, if we were to run it now, would be 1 hour. In that hour, it's going to harvest 9,909 units, and for the total runtime, because it's only 1 hour, same thing. I like to set the runtime to 6 days, which is really going to be 6 days and 4 hours because you can't get it to go to exactly 6 days. The reason for that is that when you do these very short extractions of only 1 hour, you get a higher concentration of minerals in one shot, but you also do a lot of damage to the area, and you deplete the resources much faster. It's basically not an efficient use of the harvester. So I like to move this out to 6 days and 4 hours, which it's can be a little bitchy, so we just gotta kind of play with it. Okay, so now you'll notice that our output graph here shows us the amount that we're going to harvest in each 2-hour segment. Because when we get to this length, the cycle time is 2 hours now instead of 1 hour. So if I click on the first bar, you can see that we're going to harvest 169,000, or rather 16,923 units in the first hour, 41,000 units in the second hour, etc. Okay, so now that we've demonstrated how this works, let's go ahead and select our other extractor heads. Okay, so you'll notice a couple of things. One, the size of the extractor heads is much larger. Again, that's because we changed the extraction area size, which also increases the amount of time it takes to harvest. You'll also notice that if you zoom in on this, there's a static pattern on these harvesters. That is telling us that there's interference. You can also see that there's interference because of these red negative numbers. So what that's demonstrating to us is that we have overlap. Basically, our harvesting areas are touching each other, so we're losing efficiency because they have two extractors working on the same area. So what we're going to want to do is move our extractors out so that they're not overlapping each other. You'll notice the ring here, the sphere for the extractor head, and remember earlier I said that you could actually harvest slightly outside of the circle. That's because the center point for the harvester head itself is actually what's bounded by that circle. So you can actually go 50% outside the circle. I'm going to drop that there. And as I move these, you'll notice that their interference is going away and the efficiency of the heads is going up. So I'm going to grab this one right here. This particular extractor is this one. You'll notice when I put my mouse over to highlights. So if I put this in a white area, you'll see that the harvested amount here is about 241. If I actually move this out here to the green or this blue area right here, you'll notice that the efficiency drops way down. And this is what our heat map is showing us, is where the highest concentrations of minerals are, which is why you want to try to keep these on the white and red areas. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. You'll notice that if I put this right on the white area, we're at 240. If I put it up here, it's at 227. We're losing a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. So I try to get the circles grouped as closely together as possible, because once we harvest this area, it's going to damage the area, and we're going to be moving our heads onto another area. So let's go ahead and do this. So you'll note that this one we placed still has some overlap, so that means I didn't get it just quite perfect. So I need to move it a little bit, and there we go. Move this one in. There we go. As you do this, you'll get better at this, and this will actually go very quickly, and it won't be as much of a hassle as it appears to be at the moment. It's also faster if you're not having to talk about what you're doing. All right, finish getting these placed here. Okay. Now, you'll notice that of the entire sphere, we're only harvesting one small area during this cycle. And what that means is that we can mine this area next week, we can mine this area the week after that, and we can mine this area the week after that. So that's 4 weeks with just this one spot with not having to move any gear. So then, after that, we can then destroy this extractor head and put a new one down over here, if you remember the first one we put down, and we can probably get 2 to 4 weeks out of this area as well before we have to move anything. So we can basically get 2 months out of this area without having to do any major construction. So the PI actually can be very easy to manage if you set it up correctly the first time. Let me zoom back in here. So it looks like we still have an overlap. Let me find the head that's touching. All right, it's this one right here. There we go. Okay. So now we've got no overlap. We've got good, consistent amounts being harvested on all these. 200s, especially like 240, is very good on an extraction. If we look here, we'll see now how much we're extracting per cycle. Again, these are 2-hour cycles. So on this first cycle, we're harvesting 210,864. The next one is 431,794. You'll also notice that that second one is our highest spike. So that's an important number for us to take note of. So let me just go over here real quick. I'm going to go to accessories here, and I'm going to go to Notepad. I'm just going to jot some numbers down here. So I'm going to create a new note. I'm going to call this PI data. And this is just going to be a scratch pad for us to do some basic calculations on. Okay, so we have 431,794 at our peak output. Okay, so what we can also do is we can look at the felsic magma, and essentially if we do a show info on that, let's just go to the market. So with that, we can see is that the volume of 1 unit of felsic magma is 0.01, which is very much like a mineral. So that's going to equal 43,160 100, or excuse me, rather 4,317.94 M3 every 2 hours. Okay. Okay, so that's an important calculation to bear in mind. So now what we have to do is we want to look at our link that we have here. So if we look at our link, it's telling us that it can move 1,250 M3 per hour. This cycle, this is going to generate output or product every 2 hours. So we want to make sure that our link can handle 50% of the maximum output of this harvester, which again, our highest output is this bar right here, as you can see from the chart, which is this number basically divided by 100 to tell us how much M3 we're going to move in 2 hours. So essentially we need to be able to cover 2,150, 2,160 M3 every hour to be able to transport that. If our link can't handle that volume, then product is going to end up getting thrown on the ground because the next load is going to come in before it could get transported away, and we're wasting product. So that means that we need to upgrade this link to be able to accommodate at least 2,160 M3 per hour. So if we upgrade this, you'll notice that once it's upgraded, it's going to basically double its capacity, and that it's going to end up being 2,500 M3 per hour. So we're going to upgrade that. And now if we select this, we see that it can now move 2,500 M3 per hour. So now this link can handle the output of this harvester. Okay. So going back to our harvester, if we look at our products, or rather, I should say, I need to hit install program on here in order to actually make this start running. So let me install this program. So now this is running. So you can see that the harvesters, you'll notice the animation on them. The circles are moving. That's telling you it's actively working. You can also see the harvester is actually active. So if we click on this and we look at our products now, you can see that there's felsic magma being harvested, but it's not routed. So at this point, even though we have a link, we haven't told the system where to send the product. So now what we need to do is route the product. So what we can do is we can either select this and hit create route, or the easiest way is to double click. Double clicking will save you a lot of time and aggravation when you're dealing with PI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this, and now it wants to know where we want to route this to. You'll notice also it gives you a value, so that say you had two different links that were going to two different locations, you could determine how much went down each link. Since we only have one link, we want the whole amount to get moved. So I'm going to simply double click on the space station. And now if we go to the routes for the extractor, we'll see that there's a route going from the harvester to the launch pad. And each unit has a unique identifier so that you can see which unit it's going to. Okay. So now we have a harvest going, we have a link that can handle the output of the harvester, and it's going to the spaceport. So let's take a look at our spaceport here. If we do a show info on this, you'll see that the spaceport has a total capacity of 10,000 M3. So what that tells us is that that is currently the maximum amount of product that we can store on the planet before we start losing materials. Now, since this harvester is harvesting every 2 hours, we're not going to have the full amount arriving at once. We're going to have about 2,100 arriving in an hour. So what we're going to want to do is build enough manufacturing facilities so that the incoming product gets turned around before the next batch comes in, so that we don't overload our launch pad. So we have, like I said, 2,100 approximately units coming in every hour. So what we're going to be doing is creating basic processors. So we're going to take a basic processor. You'll notice that when we go to place this, let me just go ahead and click off of this so that we don't have that in the way. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You're going to want to put your manufacturing facilities right around your spaceport. And the reason for that is that you're going to be transporting goods from your spaceport to your factories and back. So we want those as close together as possible so that the links are short, so we use as little power as possible. So with a basic factory, you'll notice that if it's overlapping, It's kind of hard to see because we're on the red, but you'll notice that there's a ring that shows up if you're overlapping. So right there, it's overlapping. We can't put it there. Move it far enough out and the ring goes away. So I'm going to put this one directly below. On here, we're going to select the product that we want to manufacture. In this case, it's silicate, or rather silicone, because silicone is made with felsic magma. So I'm going to double click that. Okay. Now you'll notice that there's a product that's being made, but it's not routed yet. We can't route it as yet because we have not created a link. But what we want to look at is what we're making and what we're sending to it. Okay. So what you'll notice on the recipe here is that to make silicone, you are going to use 3,000 magma and you're going to get 20 silicone. So we know that our felsic magma is 0.01 M3 and our finished silicone is going to be 0.38. Okay, so lost my notepad here. So we're going to be sending 3,000 units at 0.01 M3, which equals 30 M3 per batch. And the output is going to be 20 units at 0.38 M3, which equals 7.6 M3. So you'll notice there's about a 25 or about a 75% compression ratio. The finished product is about 1/4 of the size of the inputs. So if we look at the factory, we'll also note that the production cycle is 30 minutes. So we're going to use 30 M3 per factory every 30 minutes. So that means that we're going to use 60 M3 per factory every hour, which is the value that we want. So we're going to say 60 M3 per hour. So now we know that we have 2,000 at the peak output. We have 2,160 M3 coming in that we need to get rid of. So if we now go through and take the 2160 and divide that by 60, we see we need about 36 factories. Now that's a little overboard. We are going to have enough storage in our spaceport to handle some overflow, so we don't have to get rid of 100% of that. The other thing to bear in mind is that if you look at the program here, this number is fairly anomalous. This is not indicative of the entire production run. Later in the production run, the output is considerably less. So again, we don't need to be overly concerned with the total output there. And actually, that's a cumulative value. So anyway, all right. So what we are going to want to do is build approximately 10 to 15 factories here to accommodate our output. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and put down a bunch of these factories. So, and I try to do it in a geometric pattern so that I can maximize the placement and minimize the link cost. And again, because I have not submitted this yet, I can put them down and delete them if I don't like where they land until I get everything just so. And then once I submit this, this will all go into effect. So the only thing running right now is the harvester. So now as I do this, one thing you want to bear in mind is you want to keep an eye on your power usage in your CPU, the amount that you are going to be able to do is going to be driven by your command center upgrade skill and how much you upgraded that command center. If you do not have that skill high, you are going to be limited in what you can do here. So with perfect skills, I should be able to get approximately 12 factories down with one extractor head with using full heads. If you have Command Center 4, you are going to be able to get one full extractor head but not as many factories. You may find that a better balance for you is to do the one extractor head with only 9 of the 10 heads, and then probably 10 or 11 factories rather than the 12. Okay. All right. So at this point, I've got my 12 factories. Only this one is currently set for production. So first thing we want to do is create links. So I like to start and go through this in a logical manner. So I'm going to start here, then I'm going to come down this row, then I'm going to do these, then I'm going to do these, and I'm going to do this one. So first thing I'm going to do is do the links for all of them. So I'm going to hold down Control, I'm going to click, let go of Control, click on the space center. Repeat for each one. Okay, so now we have all of our factories, we have all of our links, and you'll notice that our power is just right up to the bleeding edge. So at this point, we won't be using any more power or CPU than we've already specified because of the placement of everything. So now I want to go through again in order. I want to select what I'm building, silicone, double click on it again to do the routing, and then click on the spaceport, or rather double click on it to complete the route. Okay, so now if I go to routes, I can see that I am taking silicone and I am routing it to the launch pad. So just rinse and repeat for each one. Double click, double click, double click. Okay, this one that we already have set up, we can actually just go to products and just complete the route because we'd already specified what we wanted to build. Now, again, this may seem a little daunting or a little bit arduous or time consuming, but remember that this is something that you're only going to need to do once every, 6 to 8 weeks. So it does not have to be overly burdensome if you plan out your structures appropriately. Okay, so at this point, all of the factories are defined. We have links between all of them. So what I want to do is just do a quick verification. I'm going to click on the spaceport and I'm going to check our routes. So what we are going to see here is we should see the one input from the harvester, and then we should see 12 inputs of silicone coming from the factories. So we're going to count them up real quick. And sure enough, there's 12 of them. So now, the one problem is that you'll notice that these are waiting for resources because we don't have any resources, ingoing resources routed to these. So what we want to do is come back to the launch pad. We want to go to our routes, and we want to select the felsic magma coming from the harvester. I'm going to create a route to route the product coming from the harvester to the factories. And again, I want to do these in order, so I'm going to say create route. and then I'm going to double click on a factory. Now if I go to routes again, I'm going to see that there is the original, and now I have this route for 3,000 units going to that factory. So again, I want to select the main pile, create route, next factory, rinse and repeat. Now, there are times when these modules can be hard to see, so you might have to drag around in order to be able to reach some of the ones that are otherwise hidden. It's kind of one of the annoying things about the PI interface. So you'll note that I'm clicking here and then clicking route, because if I double click on this, it does a show info window. So it's one of the times when the double click doesn't work. So you have to select it, hit create route, and then select your item. So we should at this point be done. So again, we're going to do a quick count to make sure we didn't miss anything. So again, we have 12 factories, so we should see 12 inputs. So we're going to count them up. There's 3, 6, 9, 12. Okay, so we have 12 plus the original ingoing. So now all of our factories have product routed to them, and they have their finished products routed back to the spaceport. And at this rate, we're going to be doing 12 factories times 60 M3 per hour, which is 720 M3 per hour. Now, our input to the factory we know is going to be higher. It's going to be closer to 2,000 initially, but it's going to taper off over time. So at the beginning, that's okay, because we're not going to have a lot of finished silicone to take up that space. So the spaceport will basically stockpile the extra felsic magma that it doesn't have the capacity to send to the factories. And over time, as the amount coming from the harvester lessens, there actually won't be enough per cycle to fill all the factories, and that's where that overstock will start getting used by the factories. So it'll actually end up coming out in a wash. So at this point, we're ready to go ahead and submit this. Okay, so now all that is running, and you'll notice also if you look at the links, there's some interesting things that the links will tell you. So this is our link from the harvester. You'll notice that only one side is moving, and it's also lit up. That's telling us that it's a one-way link. Only stuff is being sent to the spaceport. However, if you look at the links for the spaceport, you'll see that all of the links coming out of the spaceport, with the exception of the one going out here, are actually bidirectional. They're all going to the different, they're sending stuff to and sending stuff back from the factories, which is good. So at this point, it's just a matter of sitting and waiting. One thing that we can look at here is we can look at what our total M3 is that we're going to be generating again. So we have a total of, over the course of this 6-day run, we're going to be generating 4 million units of raw product, which is here, let's see, 039,723, which equals 40,000 M3 of raw product. However, again, remember our ratio here of being able to compress this down to about 1/4. So you can see, again, the spaceport has a total capacity of 10,000. And so this 40,000 M3 will actually end up being just slightly over 10,000 M3. So what that tells us is that probably at some point during the week, we'll probably want to do a quick flyby and export off the product that's already been produced, the silicone, probably on the 3rd or 4th day. We'll just export that off the planet. We don't even have to be here. All we have to do is undock, go to a safe spot or a POS, and simply open the planet view and export off the planet, which we'll show you in the next video. And that will prevent the spaceport from getting over full. So until the next video, that's where we're at. So we'll come back. When we come back, we'll have waited for this 2-hour cycle to finish. Right now we're only about 2 minutes into it, so I'll resume the video once that cycle is completed, and you'll be able to see the flow of product at that point. Okay, so now it's been a few hours. The harvester has had a chance to run a few cycles. If we look at the spaceport, we should see, if we look at the storage, we will see that we in fact have felsic magma, and we actually have silicon that's being produced. We can look at the factories, and we can see that they are in production, basically going through their cycles. So as I mentioned in the last segment, you can see that as the magma is coming in, it's being converted to silicone and then stored back into the system. So essentially over time, the launch pad, because it's sending out the resources that are coming to it and then coming back essentially compressed, that it is able to not get overloaded with materials. So again, this is something you want to check on after a few days to make sure it's not getting too close to full, but it's something that you can do remotely by simply undocking anywhere in a station, POS, whatever. You don't have to come to the planet. So what you can do is if you come here and you see that there's finished product and you're getting low on space, or that you might be getting low on space, what you can do is simply select the product and basically do a transfer. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to do it as a launch. What we want to do is do it from the customs office. So what we want to do is find the customs office for this planet, which we can do from the overview, or we can also just do it from space. So in this case, I'm going to do it from here. So basically what I want to do is I want to select the item I want. I want to drag it over here. You'll notice here there's a transfer cost, and I'm going to hit transfer. Okay, so now that is now in the space in the customs array, or rather the customs office, and only I have access to access that, so my product can't get stolen or lost. And now if we come back and look at the spaceport, we see that the silicone is now out of here, and we freed up space in the storage. So that's something that you can do like every 3 or 4 days. Literally takes 4 seconds. The customs office can hold up to 50K. Let's go ahead and access that again. So you'll notice, excuse me, it's 3500K. So you can store quite a bit up here, quite a bit more than you can on the planet. But in any event, that's the production cycle. So now you've seen the setup, you've seen the net effect when it's done, both the input and the output, and how to manage that. So we will cover things in more detail in the next segment. Okay, so at this point we have harvested raw materials and converted them to base materials. We have also transferred some of the product to the customs office in space. So if we go and look at Planet 2's customs office, we can see that there will be silicone that we had transferred up, and since the last time we did this, there's actually more. So we're going to go ahead and transfer the rest of this up. All right, so now that we have the product into the customs office, now we want to go and actually pick up the product, either to take it back to the station for sale, or to take it to another facility for additional processing. So what we want to do is actually warp to the customs office, and it's a very straightforward thing to do. These are easy things to find in your overview, and this is pretty much the only time that you're going to be at any kind of risk for doing PI. But if you do all your transfers from a secure location, when you're either safed up in a POS or cloaked, basically it's pretty much a hit and run. You're going to warp to the customs office, you're going to open it, grab your stuff, and you're going to warp off. So the risk to you is fairly minimal. All right, so we can right click, access customs office. You'll also want your storage open, and whoops, we don't want that in our cargo hold, we want that in our planetary hold. That's what that's for. All right, so there we go. So now we're going to take it back to the station and drop it off, and then in the next video we will go over setting up an actual production planet to do conversions of product from the first level production to the higher levels of production. So there we go.